another episode of Women of Her Story, a podcast dedicated to celebrating women who have made or are making their mark on our society. Today, I have with me dancer, activist, and proud new mama, Isis Avalos Perez. Thank you so much for joining us today, Isis.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm excited.
Of course. How are you doing today?
I'm good. Just taking it day by day, this season of quarantine that we're in. But it's been a good one because it's just kind of brought me in a space of like reflecting, So, yeah.
Good. So let's jump right on in. You were a dancer with a social justice company for about 7 years. What was dancing with that company like?
It was amazing. I mean, honestly, I had some great moments dancing. The company's technically a nonprofit and it's been around for 15 years based out of LA. And I suddenly at some point became an elder in the company because I had been in it for so long. And I, used my identity and really let it inform me as far as like the way that I move and I dance. Like that's, I think, one of the beautiful lessons I learned from dancing in this company, that I was able to make those connections. In college, I didn't really, because I also didn't have a lot of like representation of my heritage or a lot of, people that looked like me. So, but being in this company, which was all people of color, Black and non-Black people of color, I think, these last 7 years, I was really able to like hone in on my ancestry, my heritage, and then kind of just bring it forth through my dancing. So, it's definitely, it was a journey, and now I'm outside of, being in the company, and I have also learned a lot of, a reflection of how the dance field is currently, and I'm left with a lot of questions, and just kind of in that space now of really digging into these questions that I have.
You were able to still perform while you were pregnant. Was that a special time?
Oh, yeah. One of the most amazing things is that the artistic director of the company, who is also a woman and a mother, she really believed in supporting dancer moms, or dance artists who are moms, and I was very careful. I danced up until I was 6.5 months pregnant, and after that, which was right at the end of our fall touring season. So I danced in in November around Thanksgiving. And then I went on my maternity leave, and also was able to have maternity leave in the company, which was like,
oh, wow.
What? That's crazy support.
That's not real.
Yeah. So, which was a true blessing to have experienced also. And so, yeah, it was beautiful. And then after a year later, I joined back in the company, and I did one tour with my baby, and was able to bring a friend of mine to care for her while I would be during teching or teaching workshops during the shows. And so it was a whole other experience being a mom, like professional dancer and being a mom on tour. A whole new experience, but grateful, of course.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure you were concerned initially with getting support from the company when you find out you're pregnant. That's as we indicated, that's not a super regular occurrence in the dance industry. So
absolutely.
Yeah. You've mentioned that you are no longer with this company. What prompted this? What happened there, if you don't mind my asking?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was a very long journey. It wasn't like it wasn't like from, you know, day to night or anything like that. It was a long journey of us trying to figure out within inside the company, power dynamics. And I think it prompted this focus of power dynamics because our work is so because the company's work is solely based on decolonizing dance, having approaches of more democratic, egalitarian ways of working as a company. And yet, you know, the company, unfortunately, and I think like many in the dance field, run under a very capitalistic structure.
Right.
And, you know, you can't blame these companies because that's the only way they've been able to survive. That's the way, you know, you see, or at least, you know, if you're in the dance field long enough, and specifically the concert dance field long enough, you start to see how the money trickles down. And it's very sad because there is so much money, and yet, you know, it's so hard to, you know, attain, you know, money. You know, you do grant writing, and you just try to, like, you know, I think dance companies try their best to find ways and loopholes to really be able to survive and not, you know, and not find themselves not being able to pay their dancers and whatnot. And I think the company I was in really worked hard towards that. And in the end, for me, I was able to see that it just was not adding up. The fact that, you know, we were creating work about highlighting people of color's experience of oppression because of the system that we're in the United States, and yet the company was still running in that system, and in a very hierarchical colonial system.
Right.
And so that was, you know, it's hard. But I wouldn't think it's fair to say to vilify, you know, the company either. I think the company is trying their best. But and the main thing, honestly, the main journey that took me on to no longer be in the company was the fact that dancers we really brought up this whole idea of, you know, wanting to be honored as choreographers in the work, and wanting to be credited for the amount of choreography. Let's just be real, like the choreography that we're putting in the work. And I think it took years to really, you know, talk to the artistic director, and finally, I think after 3 years, it started happening. And then I think we just had tough conversations, uncomfortable conversations, and it just led to me, being fired. Like, it led to me, you know, all of a sudden being called in and being fired. And, you know, I'm not embarrassed or ashamed to say that I was fired. I think I have to say it out loud so that we can realize that, you know, this was an unintentional way of silencing me too, you know? And so, and the irony is that I was in this company of activism.
The irony of ironies there lies in that.
But, you know, like I was saying, I think people are trying their best with what they have. And I think I was trying my best to kind of get through, and maybe I could have had a different way of speaking, a more tactful way of language.
Right.
And I also wonder how much can I navigate through a higher power than myself, without giving in and just, you know, believing that we're going to change, and we just kind of find ourselves in the same cycle for 7 years, you know?
Right. I think it is important to speak out when you feel that, especially as an artist, when you're not being credited, and not even that it's a vanity sort of thing. It's just like a credit where credit is due. And if this is a is a collaboration through and through, then it should not be, you know, presented in the way a lot of things get presented, especially in the dance world.
Well, I'll tell you this, and for me, it's so important, because if we start to really really ask for the credit that we deserve and we have been long deserving of, we can then try to start to shift the paradigm of looking at the value of dancers, and in that start to have a more sustainable future for ourselves. Do you know what I mean? Because we have been taught to think that we are disposable, and that we constantly live as dancers in a scarcity mentality. Like, we're constantly thinking we're gonna get, fired now where I'm at, but like, or you're gonna be replaced right away. And here's the thing, that's exactly what's happening here with me. Like, I'm fired and I was quickly replaced by someone. And guess what? Someone else is going to get to be dancing my narrative, or they're going to, the cycle continues of they get, they're going to share their narrative at the cost of what? Like, I shared my narrative, and really the company profited off of my undocumented experience and talking and dancing about it, my Mexican heritage, talking and dancing about it. And it became an identity of the company too, because I existed in that space. And so, but the sad part is that they'll just find another Mexican American dancer to dance in the company. And so, but for me, it's bigger than that. It's, I think I'm dealing with a lot of like mental, emotional, like, wait, what? You just like pulled so much out of me. And now like I'm fired, and okay, but so I'm just like still broke. I don't know.
Have you been able to, are you allowed to utilize any of the solos that were your narrative, or does that belong to the company?
So it belongs to the company, but funny enough, that was the beginning of me like exiting forcefully, I guess, the company, because we were signing our contracts, and really, what was awesome of the artistic director was that they were really open to for us to create our own clause, to really be like, because the company was really, really working on this, really trying to work on like no longer having a vertical power structure, but maybe more a horizontal power structure. And so we were given that space, and we created, a clause. And in that clause, we were saying, refer to dance, refer to like a list of like who created what. And that led us into like writing down like really who created what. And then that led into us having a tough conversation of really who created what, and maybe like the power not wanting to be shared of being called artistic director for like a small section, or small things like that then it just, I think it just was overwhelming and became too much, and that's where then I was called to go, so I think it, that's where I was left off. I know so I no longer know what's going on. Right. I just, that I felt like we were so close, but I think something happens when and here's the other thing. Another dynamic that happens is that because dancers live in scarcity mentality, we're scared to speak up because we don't want to lose that job. Now, listen, can you believe I was like in a dance company where I was being supported as a mom, and, going with my baby, being taken care of in that way. I mean, not a lot of dance artist moms can really say that,
Right.
And so I think that might have maybe driven me to not speak out that much, but I felt something in me that I still had to speak out as far as like where credit was due. And I wasn't scared, and I wasn't scared enough to lose my job.
Right.
And I did, and that's okay, because I think, at the end of the day, there is a higher power that can just always just cancel me out,
Yeah.
And that's the sad part. How do we create I don't know if it's safe to create like a familial environment, a democratic familial environment within a company, but then at the end of the day, use your power of hierarchy, you know, to
right.
dismiss or
Yeah,
to get rid
that
of.
feels like gaslighting a little bit.
Absolutely.
You know,
Absolutely.
where you're like, oh, no, we don't have okay, well,
Yep. Oh, and then that's the other part, because so in this company in particular, but like I'm sure so many mainly POC dance companies, we use like ancestral indigenous storytelling circles, or African cipher circles. You know, these are like ancestral storytelling circles that are sacred, and so what happens is that, like, you know, these practices are being practiced within the dance company, and so, you know, you're being told and create a safe space. I'm doing my quoting hands, my quoting fingers right now, and create a safe space of like, all voices are heard, your voice is heard, you know, like,
Yeah.
you are unique in every single possible way. And like, and so what happens is that, like, you know, there's like prompts that are set up to, you know, that are, you know, you can tell a story of whatever the prompt is, and you kind of feel like you can just like open up, and because that energy and that safe space is placed. And then from that, like, the choreographer, the artistic director gets to like create choreography from your movement, because you just told your story, your trauma. You kind of opened up a trauma portal, and so now you're like moving through that trauma, and like that work or that movement ends up in the work. And so, but then you know, the colonial structure is still running at the same time. That's a mind F.
It certainly is. It certainly is.
Yeah.
Wow, that's a very interesting dynamic. One that I honestly hadn't thought of, really. In terms of this, the experience of the, like you were saying, these like ancestral, really deep moments and practices, and then those being then turned into this piece, and then at the end of the day you can still get fired, and then you've just went through this literal trauma experience that's now on the stage, and you're just like, well, okay.
Yeah. And then the other part too is that, like, you know, there's a contract, and even in my contract there's like a clause that says that you can be fired for any reason at any time. And that's like, and I signed off on that. And we were never, I mean, I was never told by anyone in the actual what is it, management of the company, administrative side of the company, like, hey, dancers, just so you know, you're signing off on a contract that does say that we can just fire you at any moment, anytime.
You know, and that makes me wonder, number one, how many creative contracts that sort of clause is included in. Probably way more than I would like to even think about. And then that's making me run through all of these contracts that I've signed, and I'm like, oh wow. Hope I didn't sign my life away on all of these things. And then also it makes me wonder, let's say you did know that part of the contract, you were fully aware of that part of the contract, let's say that you were, and then you countered it. I wonder if they would have still signed you if you said, take this out, take that out, or saying like, the only reason I can be fired is for like insubordinates, you know, like egregious error, like that kind of thing, where I'm curious.
Me too. And you know, but that's the thing, like, you even saying that, I go back 7 years ago, and I think, oh my God, I was bright-eyed and bushy-tailed out of college, like, and here's this dance company that wants me to go on tour with them, you know? And so I'm like, yes, like, you know, I will sign off. And like, but because as dancers, we've already been in this like environment of like, oh my God, it's gonna be like, I would be one of the lucky ones to land a job inside a dance company, you know,
right out of college. And
exactly. And so I'm telling you, it's like, there's just like so many paradigms and so many layers that like we have to talk about it in the dance field, because and I'm specifically saying in the United States dance field,
Mm-hmm.
community, whatever, because it's just like a trickle down effect, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
And really what happened with me inside this dance company, again, I will always say, I know for a fact with my other dance friends and sisters and brothers in the field, they've experienced something like this. And I
Mm-hmm.
think it's you know, at the core, it's just the way it's run from the very, very top, which is like who holds the most money and who
Right.
is seen as, you know, a company that they want to invest in, you
Right.
know. So
And is there anybody rocking the boat?
mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's so tough.
But, you know, out of that, you know, being where I am, and I'm being very transparent, and I hope I'm not like, God, I forget like my contract that I signed. I don't,
Hey,
I
we
don't
haven't
think I'm
mentioned
speaking.
any names. So
Yeah, yeah, I'm not mentioning names, and I don't feel like I'm speaking ill of the company anyway. I'm just
no,
saying what it is.
sure.
And I do think at this point, I find myself having danced so long in my life and having worked professionally in the field that I'm like, yo, like, I
Yeah.
know people are talking about this, but can we really talk about this? Because
Mm,
we're at a pause as in a pandemic, you know, and as dancers, we're, again, like I keep bringing up scarcity mentality, but it literally runs our entire field. Because if we were not at a pause right now, we wouldn't even have time to talk about this. You know what I
right.
mean? Be like, I need to book the next job, and I need to, like, you know, balance my, you know, side hustle to be in the dance company or whatever. But we're all
Yeah.
at a pause, and I think it's good to like start to rethink of like a different way of existing as dancers in the United States, because it's just no longer working. It's not working for us. It's never been sustainable for us. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
just like, when is enough enough? Because
Yeah.
yeah,
I still
so,
can't believe that there's not a dancers union.
yeah. Well,
There's
they
actors. Well, I
mhm,
mean, there are small ones, and then there's
yeah,
ones like within like very large ballet companies are part of a union along with the with opera organizations. But there are smaller dance unions, but there's not one that
there's not like a
encompasses.
SAG after like for a dancer.
Yeah, and there's not actors equity like there is for live theater actors. You know,
Yeah.
it's something where it's like I still can't believe that there's not, you know, something like that. And I think, you know, it it would do everyone a great service. It would also do the companies honestly a great service, because then there's a separate organization handling all of this stuff for
Absolutely.
your dancers. And
Absolutely.
then
Mhm.
yeah, and if you don't want to be a union company, then that's great. You just put yourself as non-union, and then your dancers go in knowing that the like not necessarily that the quality of content that they're going to be presenting and performing isn't up to par. It's just a different sort of company that you're going to be a part of. And I think that actors have that privilege, where if someone goes for a non-union contract, they know that it's, you know, the stipulations of the contract are going to be entirely different than a union contract. And I think it's about time that the dance world hops on board that.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think it's like you mentioned, I don't think anyone wins right now. I don't think the company, you know, even wants to be in this place or put people in this place that where I was put.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to be in this space. I want to like keep, you know, okay, on to the next like creative work and or company, and I do, and I will still be in that. And I'm also left with like hella like mental and like emotional stuff that I have to like
Sure.
work through, you know, because
Yeah.
I was like, I literally, I'm not kidding, like my life revolved around this dance company and everything, and the stories I told, and I mean every part of me was like invested in this company. Also because I'll say two things. I think as I'm saying this, I can already hear like other voices in my head saying like, well, you know, you could have made the decision not to share that
Mm-hmm.
much. And I think I'm sure people would say that like, girl, you know, you have your own agency, you can like say no. And I also you know, would say like I I wish people could really understand what it's like once you're inside of it.
Mm-hmm.
Like when you're inside of it, it like, you know, I feel like the artistic director believes so deep in the work and the message that like, you're like, yes, I believe in it too. Like, you know, like we can change the world through dance and like, you know, like you just start believing in it. And also like the environment that gets built up and the affirmations of your identity are lifted. And, but then like, I also realized there's a lot of like white savior complex in that. And there's like
Mm-hmm.
a lot of, yeah, a lot of like feeding ego in a certain way that I'm like, oh, I just never saw it that way, you know? And it just kind of, anyway, but yeah, so that was one thing. And I forgot my other point, but
It'll hit
yeah,
you at some point.
it'll come to me. But yeah, so
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, then go ahead.
I think I was just gonna say, I'm just really interested in talking about it and being transparent about it as much as I can be, because I still want to be respectful of the organization I was with. And I think, honestly, I think it's not about like dismantling or shutting down, you know, platforms. It's really about, because I think they're necessary. I think the company I was in does awesome work in certain spaces, in certain aspects of the company.
Right.
And I think it's, you know, important for us to really like validate and value those companies. And I think the focus should be on us dancers talking about it. So I have a Instagram platform called Embodied Democracy, because I really want to be in a place where I can embody democracy. And I thought that I was, and I really wasn't. And so I wonder how I can get there. And I in that process of wondering and curiosity and questioning, I'll be like just posting, you know, conversations that I'm just having, you know, with just on Instagram.
Yeah.
So people can feel like they can talk to about it. So
yeah, I'll make sure that I've been really bad about putting things in the show notes, but I always put it in the posts that I make. So we'll make sure that that we have written down your the platform that you're speaking of right now, so that we can share it definitely with everyone. So let's talk about this next journey in your life, this new lovely little girl that you have. Has it been difficult being away from your family that's in Mexico while you're going through this new journey in your life?
Yeah, you know, it's so strange because my parents were deported in 2009, and so it's been 11 years that I've kind of experienced this like being away from them for, you know, long periods of time.
Right.
And so now I'm in a place where, okay, like we're just kind of doing what we've been doing. I mean, I'm so thankful for WhatsApp, because I think it's
absolutely.
like, you know, there's just such a great place where my family and I, we have like our own little, you know,
like group chat thing.
Group chat where every day we keep in touch that way. And so I was lucky to have seen my parent, or been, you know, with my parents in during Christmas 2019, with them, and I had every plan to go in June of this year. But that's not happening.
Nope.
And then also now we're trying to do the whole like one Christmas with my parents, the other Christmas with my husband's parents. So we're gonna do Christmas at his house in Miami.
Ooh, fun.
I know, but I don't even know. I don't think I'll be able to see my family until next year. Who knows? I might like maybe try to sneak in a flight. Oh, and then the other thing is that I still have a Mexican passport, and my Mexican passport. So I have a resident card, a U.S. resident card, and then my Mexican passport expires in June. And so, now that we're in quarantine, I'm trying to figure out how to renew my passport, if it's in person, if I could do it online, just to have that regardless.
I think you should be able to do that online. I don't know. I could be. I mean, I don't know enough about
Yeah, consulate stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, honestly, neither do I. Like, I have to continue learning. I'm actually going to register my daughter Luna as a dual citizenship. So she'll be a citizen of Mexico
I
and of
love
here.
that.
So I'm excited for that.
Good.
But yeah, it was really nice when she finally met my parents again this past Christmas, and it had been. She was 9 months when she met them, and the most amazing thing happened was when they saw her at the airport, and I can't even tell you how, like, she knew them. Like, she didn't feel weird because she had already, she can sense like stranger danger, and so she would always like reach for me. And when I passed her off to my mom, she just kept looking at my mom. Like, just so quiet, just staring at my mom, and I just lost it. I was like, oh god.
Baggage claim solving.
Yes, exactly. And it was just so telling of like our, who we are as like spiritual beings. Like, we're so connected to our ancestry and just to our family, lineage. And I witnessed that during Christmas.
You know what I kind of wonder a little bit? This is going to sound super weird, but babies are also really attached to the smell of certain people. And I wonder if your mom and you smell similar. Does that make sense?
Yes. Yeah.
Because
it's a good question. I know my mom smells better than me. I will just say that. Because she wears this like beautiful perfume, and I rarely wear like perfume, but
oh man,
maybe.
Well, so I have a question that might sound ignorant, but I would like to know the answer because I don't know it. Do you mind explaining to me and to the listeners the difference between the terms Hispanic and like Latino, and why it's important to understand what you're saying and to use the terms correctly?
Yes. I always have to refresh myself. Like, I feel like I have like a file folder in my brain, and I'm just like, right now, I just opened it and I'm like trying to like flip the pages. But I'll tell you this. I grew up in Texas, and for me, being called Hispanic was like a normal thing. And now living in LA for 8 years, and like really, seeing like a strong presence of Chicano activism and culture here in Los Angeles. I was educated a lot in it. And so basically, Hispanic was a term given in the 60s when we first started doing the census in the United States. And it was a way to kind of just like group us together. And Hispanic comes from the word Hispaniola, which is old. It was a reference that the Spanish conquistadores, the Spanish colonizers gave to New Mexico, and pretty much that the whole Arizona, New Mexico, Nevada, California like region was like they were trying to turn it into New Spain, basically. And so they call it, I think it was like La Nueva Española. And so Chicanos here, from what I've learned and what I've experienced really, and I really do align with, is that Chicanos don't want to, and I'm also a Chicana, so a lot of them, I'm not going to generalize that every Chicano, but it is known that they prefer to not be called Hispanic because it's kind of like still honoring the fact that their ancestors who were native to this land were conquered by the Spanish.
Okay.
So when you say, oh, Hispanic, it kind of brings up a history of that they've been, that through their ancestry or familial lineage. And so they want to reclaim that. But we also don't want to be called Latino. So that's the other thing. Because Latino is actually just it's still rooted. I think Latino was actually a term given by a French colonizer, and it was like to reference all those that were like part of like Latin America, and it has the Latin root to it,
right?
And it also it includes everyone, but I think it excludes Spain and Portugal. I'm not. I have to again update myself.
Pretty convoluted,
yeah. There's a lot, but I will say that even then, we also don't want to be called Latino because it doesn't have like a specific reference to like who we are as you know, as our ethnicity. So it's interesting. I think both terms are still they were termed by colonizers.
Sure.
And so some folks, like let's say Hispanic, Latino, don't care. They're like, whatever, you know, we are where we are. And some folks are like, nah, like we need to talk about this history and not continue to be, you know, to accept being called or termed a certain way by colonizers, because has been our existence for generations.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I personally, I would call myself Latina before I call myself Hispanic.
Okay.
Just because I also feel like I have a in my, you know, in the last decade, I have really come to really understand and learn a lot more about my own history, my Mexican American history. And that's really because I just had to do it on, you know, I just started reading books and buying books and, you know, learning. But I really, you know, saw how California, Nevada, New Mexico, Arizona was like part of Mexico, and there were literal like people who were living, you know, in from like however long for centuries on the lands, and then one day they wake up and it's the United States.
Yeah, one day they wake up and there's just been lines that have been drawn through their land, and they're like, I'm sorry, what?
Yeah. And it's like, what? I'm American now? Like, what happened? You know, but then, you know, and so it's just like, it's, it's very layered and
it sounds like it's personal too. Everybody's going to have their different thing they prefer to be called, or honestly, like people have names. So maybe it's just like, this is Isis, you know, like if you don't know, just call them by their actual name or ask them, kind of thing.
Yeah. And also like what you asked me is also so valid. Like, I'd love to be asked, like, how would you like to be referred, Hispanic or Latino or something else? And honestly, I think that's an ongoing conversation. I think as us Latinos are trying to figure that out. I will say one thing. One of the phrases that is mentioned is spoken a lot of here when I moved to California was the border didn't cross. We didn't cross the border crossed us. And so that's a reference to really saying like Mexican Americans that are now known as Mexican Americans have always been on the lands, like on this land. And then, you know, and I started reading this book called, my God, it's not coming to me. I read it like 3 years ago, but it was just referencing how Mexicans or Mexican Americans have been here for generations are actually part connected to Native Americans. We all kind of come from the same lineage.
Yeah. And
so, but we still, as Mexican Americans, we don't see ourselves as Native Americans either. Right. So it's like, that's like a whole, like, it's a whole other thing. But that's the main phrase, you know, like, that's attached to not being called Hispanic. It's because we've been here and we were just termed that by the U.S. Census.
Right. Yeah. Right. After they drew the lines and then they were like, by the way, this is what you are now.
And now we're going to call you Hispanics. You know, it's just like, it's so invasive and like, it's crazy. But, you know, it's good to know that now in 2019, 2020, like now we're really wanting to talk about it because we need to, you know?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Have you ever experienced being profiled or just name called, anything like that in public? And did those experiences affect your idea of your own self-worth?
You know, okay, so I'll start off by saying this. I can't tell you in my words exactly the experience. Like, I can't describe to you this experience, but I think every person of color, or again, my quote hands are coming up right now, minority in the United States, can tell you that they know the feeling when you walk into a space and you're seen as other. Like, it's very nuanced. It's like, it's this thing where like you enter the space and people are looking at you and they're looking at you a certain way. And I, for many years, like, would think maybe they find me pretty. You know, that was like my you know, my thing. And then that's a whole other thing, because to be honest, like, because I have some sort of like Eurocentric sort of features, like my smaller nose, or, you know, my bigger almondy eyes, like I was able to have the privilege of kind of navigating space easier. But if I looked more, I guess what you would describe indigenous or native, I don't know if I would have, you know, navigated as easy as I did. But so I always felt that, like, I'll tell you this. I grew up in South Texas, so it was 95% Mexican American folks. And then I moved up to Dallas Fort Worth, and that's where I started experiencing that.
Yeah.
That's where I was like, oh, wait a minute, what's this? Like, why do I feel this weird energy? Like someone's like looking over my shoulder all the time. So that's that. To be honest, I've never actually, I was called the N-word once.
What?
Yes, but wait. Here's the ironic part. It wasn't, okay, so I'm gonna tell you this. It was not a white person. For the record, it was not a white person. But I will say it was a white passing Mexican American. Okay. So let me tell you something. There's deep colorism that exists in my people's culture. And colorism is like the sister of racism. And so you can experience, you can experience some sort of like racist characteristics and in colorism, which is like, you know, from the lightest to the darkest. And then depending on where you fall in the spectrum, you're kind of seen a certain way. But anyway, I was called the N-word by this, like, in middle school, by this boy that I had a huge crush on. And he was like light brown hair, super like light skinned, like green eyes. And anyway, long story short, he was like at the at the mall one day, and I told my friend, I was like, I'm gonna slap him. And
that's flirting.
And I thought he was at the line for Chick-fil-A at the food court at the Sunrise Mall in Brownsville, Texas. And I think I was in 8th grade. It was 8th grade. Yes, it was 8th grade. And I tapped him on his shoulder and I was shaking. But I knew something inside of me was like wrong, that like that had happened, you know? And he turns around and I slap him. And he looked at me and I go, that's for calling me a, you know, I say it. And I walk away and I literally hid inside the Sears, like inside one of the circle racks. I just like hid inside because I was so scared that the police were going to come or I was going to go to jail or something. It was crazy. And then I felt bad, like, you know, weeks later, and then come to find out that this is the sad part. His mom was standing behind him in the line. I didn't even know that. And I slapped her son in front of everyone at the food court. And then at the same time, I'm also like, but like, you also need to know that your son is using this word.
Yeah. Yeah. No, he deserved it. He deserved it.
But you know what? The funny thing is that freshman year, we somehow had a conversation he and I apologized, and he actually apologized to me, and we kind of found reconciliation, like a restorative justice, I would say.
Oh, good.
So now a lot of the work that I do in my activism through dance, I actually talk a lot about colorism in my Mexican culture.
Mm-hmm.
And I do this because if I come from a country that's 500 plus years colonized, and our views of Afro-Mexicans or indigenous people in my country are, we're very there's a lot of anti-Blackness, anti-indigeneity complex.
Mm-hmm.
And so then those Mexican folks immigrate into the US, or that have been here, whatever,
Mm-hmm.
and then see the way that racism systemically works, and also experience the anti-Blackness, anti-indigeneity complex. You get like this double reinforcement.
Yeah.
And so, you look at the minorities that voted, however they did in the last elections, or just the minorities that have succumbed to hate crimes based on race.
Mm-hmm.
You see a lot of Latino folks up in there. Let me be honest with you. You see a lot of like Perez's or Rodriguez's, Martinez, and you're like, what?
Yeah.
Like, how are we being hella racist in the United States? Like, we're immigrants. But let me tell you, it's because we come from a history of being colonized. And so, since I'm Mexican American, I'll talk about white folks and and whatnot, but my place to talk is really about my people, because I feel like we have to be allies to Black folks in this country if we really want freedom for all quote unquote minorities.
Mm-hmm.
And our allyship has to begin with us doing the work first, as
Mm-hmm.
in our culture. So
Yeah.
but that's just as far as like what I've experienced. And also, like, to be honest, like, I think I had a beautiful experience in college. I was like, one of three in
Mm-hmm.
minorities in college. And I mean, you were there.
Yeah. I was there. I can attest.
You were there. You saw what it was like.
I did see.
And and I was very lucky. I don't think I felt ever that I was treated a different way. I was never called anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I will also say that, like, I'll speak for myself as as a person of color. You just know the way you have to navigate when you're in a predominant white space.
Yeah.
You just and
Mm-hmm.
so, and I did have to adapt to that being in my undergrad, being a dance major in my undergrad.
Right.
But like, it's fine. Like, we as people of color learn how to code switch or navigate, in spaces.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm glad that we're talking about it now, because we should bring perspective to why we have to do that in the first place.
Right. Yeah. In deciding to be a mother, did these things all cross your mind for your future child?
Oh yeah. I mean, I'm actually raising my daughter. I'm only speaking Spanish to her, and she's going to learn English. She's going to go to school and she's going to learn English, but I'm actually trying to do something. I don't know if it's going to work, but I'm going to assimilate like what my growing up experience. So my mother, we came here and documented when she was in her 30s, and she tried, girls, like, she tried to learn, English. Like, she did all like the Inglés Sin Barreras, which is like a super famous Latino, like, what is it? It's like the Rosetta Stone for Latinos.
Oh.
Yeah. It's called English Without Barriers, Inglés Sin Barreras. But anyway, my mom, girl, she got like, we had like the 10 VHS tapes in our home. Like, she would go to these like free like city like adult schools, learning centers.
Mm-hmm.
God, she did everything to try to learn English, and she understands it, but she can't really speak it.
Mm-hmm.
And so growing up, like, I could only speak Spanish to my mom, and I would speak in English to my siblings, and I would get so frustrated. I remember being like, Mom, I just wish I could just tell you in English. It would be so much easier. And now, oh my gosh, it is such a blessing for me to like be able to speak fluent Spanish,
Mm-hmm.
and then switch to English. And so I'm going to try to do the same with Luna, with my daughter. I'm going to get her used to only speaking in Spanish to me.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I want her to feel more comfortable speaking in Spanish to me, and she can speak in English, you know, outside of our home, or even when she has siblings, who knows? But but first Spanish, and you know, foremost. And also, like, I'm gonna teach her more about Mexican American history, because I think, you know, the more I've learned about the history that, you know, or the contributions that Mexicans have had in this country, the more I feel like dignity to speak about and to speak out and do my activism, because I'm like, yo, you know what? We've been here. We've been doing this work with y'all, and we've made this country, you know, the way, you know, not that it's the best right now, right? But we've helped build it, you know, and so I'm doing a lot of different things, and you know,
What movements have you been able to participate in hopes to bring like attention to the changes that need to take place?
You know, I've done some, you know, I guess marches or protesting on the streets and stuff for different things. I did the May Day labor, you know, May 1st protest that happens every year. And actually, out of, I think it was, the 2017 one, or 2017, they captured an image of me and my hermana, Bianca Medina, while we were at that march, and it ended up being at the front cover of National Geographic.
Oh my gosh. I think I saw that. I think I remembered that happening. I'm pretty sure I do.
Crazy, because I was like, I used to be in that dance company back then. I was like, yo, we're gonna go to this. We got to show up. You know, we can't just be dancing about social justice. We got to be out on the streets. You know, and so I got us all to go, and sure enough, I didn't know that the photographer, one of those people that were I remember just a bunch of people taking pictures of us, but like, oh, it's gonna be someone's Instagram, and then next thing I know, we were tagged, you know, because we were on the cover of National Geographic. But anyway, you know, honestly, my focus is on humanizing the undocumented experience for the immigrant experience here in the U.S. And the way that, you know, I don't know a lot of the actual, like, I don't even know, like, the you know, political jargon, or like even political like study of how everything works, but I do know my culture, and or at least my experience. I have, you know, I grew up with Mexican documented parents. I just know my lived experience, and I can speak from the culture, and I do know that uplifting our culture and bringing dignity back to our culture in the context of the United States will help the movement of, you know, really bringing a more equitable future for immigrants, and obviously Mexican Americans, but honestly for all immigrants in this country.
Right.
So my focus is on immigrant rights and humanizing the undocumented experience.
Do you have a support system to have your back when you start to question yourself or feel like overwhelmed with this is so much that has to be done?
Yeah, first and foremost, I would say my partner, Anthony. He, you know, I think it helps that he's not in the whole activist, artivist, decolonizing like community, because he gives me a lot of like outside perspective, and so he really keeps me grounded. He also, like, he's a first generation on one side through his dad, who's Cuban, and he's second generation from his mom's side, who is Jewish.
You guys have quite a melting pot.
Yes, and a political one too. Like, whoo, talk about political views on his end, and then my end. My daughter, poor baby.
She's gonna be a mediator.
yeah. But he just kind of has his own perspective, and that's helped me a lot. I also have found like a really good group of women, sisterhood friends who have just been really supportive and amazing. Actually, two of them were my college roommates for like 3-4 years. They're like my sisters now, and it's funny because our, it was the three of us, and I was the brown one, which is Mexican American, Esther, who's Black, and Kristen, who's white. So we had like the rainbow going on in my college house. And so, but it was, they really have always been, ride or die since the get. So I do have a support system, and I feel very thankful. Also, they showed up, they came through, my girlfriends, when I had Luna. I mean, I had like literally a village, like people dropping food at my door, and just holding space for me, just in any way possible. They were just absolutely the best, so feel very thankful to have that support system.
Do you have any advice for people who are wanting to stand with you in your mission, but don't know how or where to start, especially with social distancing and everything that's happening right now?
I think we just need to talk about racism in this country, like, to be honest, because like it affects Mexican folks. It affects, our poor Asian AAPI community right now, going through this, through this pandemic and in this U.S. context, and being, racially profiled. And it's this, what I've learned in my whole journey in activism and just my life experience, and coming from Mexico, who again is a colonized country, it's like, this beast called racism is like an actual beast, and it filters in every single aspect. And honestly, I am an ally to Black people in the United States, and I say that because I have more privilege, because I'm again, colorism. I'm a little bit lighter skinned, and Latinos are somehow like very likable in the white gaze, and so we get by with our music and our hot food and blah 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 blah. But at the end of the day, like, I want to be an ally, for Black folks in this country, because until Black people are free in this country, then we can all be free. And that is something that we have not dealt with in this country. And I'm here to do the work, because I'm still young. Like, get back at me in 30 years, I may not be maybe too tired. But I think that's the message that I want to do. I want to say, honestly, above all, be an ally to Black people.
Okay.
That's all I'm gonna say.
And like you were saying, this is all things that we have to talk about. And we're always in danger of repeating the past if we shut down the conversations that are hard to have.
I think that's how I ended up fired too.
Full circle.
Fired. But it's really, that's telling of how it's everywhere. Do you know what I mean? It's filtered everywhere, even in a cute social justice dance company. Like, racism, white supremacy exists everywhere. And so we just gotta talk about it. And it's uncomfortable, and I get shaky. I've cried. It's a lot, but yeah. Oh, I will say one thing. I took, I don't know if you've ever heard of the People's Institute of Survival and Beyond. They do this workshop called Undoing Racism. And that workshop, it was a 3-day workshop. They usually do like 5-day, I think. It shifted everything. Like I learned so much, and it brought so much clarity to who we are as Americans and as our identity. And yeah, from then on, it just completely like pushed me forward. And I highly recommend that to anyone. If this is your first time hearing of Undoing Racism by the People's Institute of Survival and Beyond, look it up. They're doing great work. It's led by organizers from started, I think, in the 70s.
Wow.
Yeah, based out of New Orleans. They are, they're doing the work. So learning from them and talking about systemic racism.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah. Before we get to our last 2 questions, is there anything else that you would like to add, where we can find you on social media maybe, and you can replug the other social media account that you've talked about, or if you have some more beautiful thoughts, anything else?
Yeah, honestly, I think I've said it all. Bringing me back to my people, being a Black ally, and undoing racism. The 3 things. And but so you can find me on Instagram. My dancer account is La Morena Moves, LAMORENA Moves, with an S at the end, and which means the brown woman moves. La Morena, yeah, that's what it's a term of endearment for brown complexion women, or brown Black. But anyway, and you can also find me talking about white supremacy inside dance, or colonial system inside the dance field in the United States, at Embody Democracy. I just started that up, so don't be scared if you just see 80 followers. I just started it. Given the times of pandemic. So yeah. But you can find me at Embody Democracy and La Morena Moves.
I love it. So I ask the same last two questions to everyone that comes through the podcast. The first is, what is your second favorite color? Tough one.
I bounce between the two because they always go up and then back down. Where am I right now? Magenta, fuchsia, purple, pink, magenta.
Yeah. Why that color?
I don't know. It just has this richness to it.
Feel good.
It reminds me, every time I think of that color, it reminds me of the rebozos, which is the shawls of old Mexican ladies. When I walk through the pueblos that my parents are from, it brings warmth to me when I think of that color.
And lastly, what, in your opinion, is the best part of being a woman?
Jeez. This is a good question.
If you have multiple answers, bring them on.
Yeah. Well, the first thing that comes to mind, but I also want to be very, very aware of not every woman has this experience, but giving birth, I think, for me was it was truly the most painful thing I've ever experienced. Physically, you do feel your bones are breaking inside of you. but I think it's the most profound human experiences. I think obviously genetically only women can experience, and not all women, but if you're born with gendered in this way, yeah, I think that was an ultimate privilege for me personally. I will say that. I also, one of the best things about being a woman is that we are nurturers, and we mimic Earth. We mimic the way Madre Tierra, Mother Earth is she's like multitasking all the time, and we are great multitaskers. Like we can do 20 things at once, you know. We just like, we're just naturally that way. We nurture, we just, and we pain through the same way, you know, same way that you know, she's been in pain for so long. So I feel very blessed to feel like I'm so connected through being a woman to like Earth, to Madre Tierra. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Isis.
Thank you, Heather. It was so great talking to you.
Yeah, I just love how candid and honest and, like you've been saying, transparent you are with your experiences, with your journey. That's so important. I think that's a very important quality to have. And I love that you are taking it upon yourself to make sure that these are experiences that we're talking about.
I mean, I think, you know, it's my truth. And what if I've learned anything in activism, that you speak truth to power. That's all I'm gonna say. And I don't know how powerful my truth will be, but I know that it is my truth, and that does give me power. So that's
amen. Oh man. And thank you, listeners, so much for tuning in again. Don't forget to rate and review the show so that more and more people can be inspired and have a fire lit under them. You can follow us on Instagram at Women of Her Story Podcast, and you can also send us an email to womenofherstorypodcast@gmail.com. Until next week, be safe, stay healthy, and show the world what you're made of.
This is a New York Lich production.